Good evening. Good evening. I'm Councillor Joe Higson, Chairman of Climate Transition Corporate Environmental Services Policy Advisory Committee. I'm pleased to welcome you to the meeting this evening. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? Okay, I ask that so that people at the meeting will know if this will be happening. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated, and members of the Democratic Service Team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Item 1, are there any apologies? Just running late, so let me record that Councillor Couch is running late. Are there any substitute members?
I believe Dennis is en route. Is that correct? He had a problem with his key. Or was he just here? Yeah. Oh, he's not coming. Okay.
Committee.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, I intend to take the following documents as urgent. Item 13, corporate property acquisition as an urgent item. And Appendix 2, the first quarter risk update, to Item 10, the first quarter finance risk and risk monitoring report as an urgent update. Appendix 2 to Item 10 has been provided in the amended agenda published last week and was sent in the courier run. Item 13 has been provided as an urgent update today, with paper copies have been circulated. As the item has only arisen today, did members want to take some time to read the item before we consider it? You'd like to take some time? So we...
How long you want to consider it as a committee? How long do you think would be appropriate?
You think 10 minutes? Okay.
10 minutes to adjourn to read it?
10 minutes to adjourn to read. Okay, are we okay to continue? Okay, so I also intend to take item 12, reference from Council, Nature Recovery Declaration, after item 9, the forward plan to allow an officer to be present. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 4, are there any visiting members? Okay, thank you. Item 5, are there any disclosures by members or officers? No. Item 6, are there any disclosures of lobbying? No. Item 7, I move that all items be taken in public unless any member of the committee wishes to refer specifically to the information contained within item 13, the one that we've just been reading, corporate property acquisition. It's the yellow pages in that. In which case the committee will need to enter into closed session due to the likely disclosure of exempt information. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 8, are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? So you've got a copy of the minutes. Okay, so there are no comments on the accuracy of the minutes, so...
I recommend they be accepted then, Chairman.
Okay. So I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of July 2024 be approved as a correct record and...
It's just an error on the cabinet members. Councillor Cox is down as cabinet member for housing and homelessness, and she isn't.
Oh yeah.
That could be changed.
Okay, yeah, that's duly noted. So apart from that error, I move that other than that error, the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of July be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 9. So this is the forward plan. Okay, so are there any comments on the forward plan, or do the cabinet members wish to make any comments? So I move that the forward plan be noted. Is that agreed? Thank you. So item 12. This notice of motion has been referred to the committee from full council on Wednesday the 17th of July 2024. This Policy Advisory Committee is able to recommend that the Cabinet to adopt the motion with amendment or take no further action. And this is going to be introduced by Councillor Harwood, Cabinet Member for Planning, Policy and Management.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members. Essentially, what this declaration seeks to do is to almost update our current policy, because we declared as a local authority a climate and biodiversity emergency, and you'll remember that Councillor Mumford was very significantly involved in that. Since around 2020, when we kind of finally put that into place, there's been a lot of national impetus behind seeking to stem the decline in nature in the UK, and nature recovery strategies are now required by all upper tier local authorities across the country, and here in Kent County Council of currently consulting upon their nature recovery strategy, and the Mason Borough Council is involved in that work at officer level. And further to that, there is a move towards nature recovery declarations. They've taken place in some local authorities in the West Country, Devon notably, and in the Midlands, and they have actually helped to lever in some cash for initiatives and projects locally, which I think is another worthwhile reason for putting our head above the parapet. However, what I think is the most significant thing about the motion that went through full council in July is that essentially it is updating what we do. The language is updated. If you actually look at what it's suggesting we do, it reflects current policy and practice. And instead of being very focused on specific services within the local authority, it is much more about a local authority wide just change in the way that we do business across the board. And I think it will give more potential for us as members to intervene appropriately when we can, when we think that there's a service that with some tweaks could deliver better for nature. Because the bottom line is that nature is in catastrophic decline. It is in greater decline in England than it is in other parts of the British Isles, because of the amount of development and the population density we have. And nature is declining, not just in those areas where development is going on, it's declining just as rapidly in nature reserves and in national parks and in more untouched areas. So there's something really significantly wrong going on out there. And I think that Maidstone, being in the heart of Kent, in the heart of the southeast, we are in a part of the world where we've got a real challenge on our hands if we're going to protect even the common nature. There's a thing called shifting baseline syndrome, that when you're younger, you're used to there being loads of moths or seeing loads of butterflies in fields and so on, but you gradually get used to the fact that they're not there. And that has really happened. For those of us who were kind of children in the 70s, think about how many birds you used to see about. Think of the butterflies, think of what was there, and then think of now and how silent it is, and how the skies have got the swifts have gone. Even in Brenchley Gardens was full of birds. But they've gone, and unfortunately, the younger members of this committee will never know, and we're not that old, but it has changed beyond reason. But you just get used to it, and I think we've got to start doing things differently. And I think this is a real opportunity to, as I say, to really champion nature in the borough and also be advocates. So when we're dealing with partners, with the water companies, with developers, with the Kent County Council, with Highways England, we can champion nature with them as well, and make sure they're working as hard as we are. In terms of financial implications, I don't think specifically coming out of this declaration there's any cost. It's about a different mindset and a different way of doing things. There may be things that save money, there may be things that cost money, but actually a lot of what we're doing in terms of biodiversity net gain and so on, there's a lot of opportunity out there for getting private sector money moved into nature conservation and into nature. And just finally, we talk about nature, but we're part of nature and we absolutely depend on it. We need clean water and a decent water supply. We need clean air to breathe. We need the crops that we eat to be pollinated. So it's much more expensive to clean up polluted water. It's much more expensive to pollinate your crops with bought in hives and so on, because there's no nature out there to do it for you. So I just, I'd like to hear kind of what colleagues' views are, but I think it's just good that we stick our colours on the mast and kind of use this to help us fight in an even more effective way going forward for nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. So, does the committee have any questions for Councillor Harwood or Officer Angela Woodhouse? Councillor Cannon.
Thank you, Chairman. I seem to remember Councillor Russell, when this came to in front of us last time, mentioned that putting some costs and some money next to this. I can't see anything that's been done there. I mean, do you think that will be done at some point? Is this sort of the strategic document that you want, and then you'll sort of flesh it out with meaningful costs and things that we'll then do as a council? And then the second point is, I mean, there's lots of ambitious areas in here. The one point that I don't really agree with is 9. I know it says work positively with farm businesses, but I'd suggest that farms do know what they're doing, and they don't really need people from the council coming along to sort of tell them what to do.
Right, if I may, coming back, I'll answer it in coming backwards. I mean, I come from a farming family with all sides of my family being farmers, and farming is the most destructive activity of nature by a very long distance with what goes on to crops and the way that land is managed. Yes, there is change, and some of that change is being forced through DEFRA policy and so on. Some is coming from the industry itself. However, I do think that this is worded in a positive way to actually work with the farming industry and with landowners to deliver environmental land management. ELMS is here. It's actually here. We're needing to do it, and for very good reason, to keep our water clean and to ensure that we have still got some wildlife left. We've all got to work together to deliver it. And I think as a local authority, we can do much more to work with the farming industry to actually kind of help deliver upon farm clusters and grant funding and so on that we can lever into areas. When you go to some other parts of England, it's remarkable the work that's been done in parts of East Anglia and so on, where with the likes of Norfolk County Council heavily involved in that. So I think it is truly and genuinely a positive move to try and deliver that. And I think you're right, some farmers know and land managers know that land very well. And I think there are other farms where it's being led by the profit margin from the supermarket or whatever that's driving you to get the highest yield. And I think that actually sometimes they can do with a bit of backup. Of course, there's a lot of agricultural land which is not actually within the environmental land management system when it comes to some intensive fruit and other kind of hydroponic systems. So I think hopefully we can work closely with that sector. In terms of the costs issue, I think the document is much more a statement of intent. I think there is lots of actual policy going on, and I mentioned biodiversity net gain because I think that's a really big one. However, I think and what I like about this is that it's a reference from council and not from a cabinet member as well, if you see what I mean, so that the whole council, across party, can actually kind of be behind this, and it really helps in terms of being an advocate for nature and influencing some partners like the water companies and others that we talked about. So there may be some costs, but I don't think costs arising will be specific to the declaration. I think they'll be specific to the projects which are ongoing through the various services in the local authority, which are all doing something to try and support nature recovery. Yeah, sorry, it's a bit long-winded, but I think it's quite, this is about the most important issue there is, because we all depend upon nature for everything, to be alive, basically.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I fully support Councillor Harwood's motion proposal. I've been involved with survey work for 25 years, and you're so correct when you say even in that short period of time, the decline of species across the board, from bugs, insects, it's devastating. And people who are working in that industry know that something has to happen, and it has to be radical, and it has to happen, you know, sooner rather than later. So anything that this council can do to help that, I'd be, you know, fully in support of.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Councillor Harwood for putting his reasons and justifications forward very clearly and succinctly. Even today, I was delighted to find one ladybird, and that's the first ladybird I've seen up. Well, I'd forgotten about them, to tell you the truth. I rue the loss of the beautiful thrush. Where are the swallows and the swifts? You know, the one good thing about France is that you would always get swallows and swifts, but let's go off the subject. When reading this, I'm afraid I did begin to feel that it was a bit of an election statement. I felt as if I needed to vote for somebody somehow. So it's pretty strong in what it's saying. And I do think, I'm not convinced that we're taking the right approach to pin everything on climate change per se, because for my money, it is due to humans. There are too many of us on this earth. I should know, I've added about 8 to the population since I got married, so I'm just as guilty. But also it's our industry. You look at the industry that we've had, the way we run our lives. We are all at fault. We can't just blame climate change. So that's not too happy about saying the impacts of climate change. It's more than that. It's the way we run our economy. It's everything. I think we need to be careful not to raise expectations. And that's what I felt when I read through this. I thought, blimey, where's the budget? Who's going to resource this? But what helped me in what you said, though, Councillor Harwood, is that actually it's the statement of intent that officers are already trying to do. Have I understood you correctly in that?
Yes, that there is a statutory requirement for officers to do that across the services. I think this statement of intent is just about that we, across the board, corporately, perhaps think about these issues, rather than it just being individual officers within individual services, making it a little bit more democratic, if you like, that we're all considering, you know, do we need to do this, or should we do it a little bit different, so that we are more like France or Greece or something and still have some wildlife.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the comments on sort of how to see this document in relation to funding and budget. On the point 9, I am slightly alarmed by some of the things you said. I know you want to try and support farms positively, but I got the impression that you also, I mean, dare I ask what you want to do to a farm that does pursue profit or something of those nature? Because you're saying you want to work positively, but then you were also quite vocal against farming in Maidstone, and to my mind that's not something I can support, so I would propose that we remove point 9 as a proposal.
If I may come back, I was dipping sheep before you were born, and the chemicals that were used to dip those sheep, when they got into watercourses, they killed everything, literally everything, the whole length of the stream, and they would be drained away back. Well, you know, that explains a lot, the amount of sheep dip that I swallowed, but that did terrible damage. Now, those organophosphate sheep dips are consigned to history, consigned to the dustbin, and the approaches taken are far more environmentally sound. That came about not because of individual farmers wanting to change the way they do things, but because of primary legislation, because of what was happening to the natural environment. there is significant change through DEFRA's environmental land management coming forward and coming down the line. Some of it's already here, some of it is coming. All that's referenced in 9 is that we work with farming businesses as effectively as we can to make sure that ELMS works. And ELMS has to work. And as I say, I just come back to the point that I have been heavily involved, and my family, on both sides of my family, and that's what I do at weekends. There is no agenda against farming, but because of my experience in agriculture, I know the damage it can do. I've seen it firsthand, and we need to change it because we can't go on the way we are. And just like DDT was swept away, though it's still in a few sheds, I'm sure, we need to change the way we do things, and everybody in the industry recognises that as well. Thank you.
Quickly, it's Councillor Jones.
I just want to say, I mean, I sit on a farm cluster meeting, and I think that item 9 is targeted at a very, very small percentage of farmers. I mean, I live in a farming community, and all the farmers that I know are very mindful of the environment and you know, work to preserve what they have. They see themselves as custodians of the land. They know, you know, all the people that I know are very dedicated and have the best interest at heart for the land. But I think this clause in here is, as I say, targeted at a small minority, but it's important that it's in there because, you know, we just need to cover all bases should there be farmers out there, and there are a few that, you know, if they need to be you know, not educated, that's the wrong word, but if you know, we need to go out and discuss their ways of farming, then that's in there. But you know, the farm cluster that I sit on, you know, they wouldn't think twice about that. They'd say, yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. And if I may come back, I've read and reread item 9. There's a piece of new guidance and legislation that's been introduced, and we're just saying that we'll work positively with those businesses to deliver on it. I don't see that it's singling anything or anybody or any organisation out in any way.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gooch.
Yeah, can I just say, I fully understand where Councillor Cannon's coming from, but I think it's important to look at all these items here. They have all got a similar kind of positivity within them. We want to encourage, we want to work with, to make the right things happen. So if we keep that context throughout these items, I still think they're a bit OTT, but I'm willing to go with the flow because you're absolutely right. The devastation to nature, I've watched enough programs on it, so I know that what you are saying about the devastating loss of nature in England alone is absolutely right. I cannot argue with that. So therefore, to follow my own feelings through, I must support this. I've got to support it. But I would look at it in an entire context. And it is a context of a statement. Thank you, Chairman.
So, Councillor Cannon, do you have a seconder? So, Councillor Forecast, seconder. So we'll put that to a vote then. So the vote is to remove item 9 from the declaration. So can we have show of hands for the motion? 2. Can we have a show of hands against the motion? That's including me too. So, so that motion is not accepted. So, does anybody have any further comments? If not, then I will take it to a vote of adopting the motion or taking no further action. for recommendation to the Cabinet. So any further comments? Yeah, so vote in favour of recommending this to the Cabinet. Okay, so that is resolved. Matter is resolved. Oh, yes, sorry. Any against? Okay, so the matter is resolved. So item 10, this is to be introduced by Councillor Cox, Cabinet Member for Corporate Services.
Thank you, Chairman. So in this agenda item, we're looking at the first quarter finance and risk monitoring position. This relates to the 24-25 budget, and as I say, the first quarter of that. The PAC committees are all asked to look at the budget, performance and risk monitoring within their remit. So that's the context of going through this today. So this report sets out the financial and risk position as at the end of the first quarter 2025. It's worth just stating that the budget for 24-25 was set at the start of 2024. The focus of this report is actual performance versus the budget numbers agreed at that time. It's worth also just pointing out that in the first quarter, there's been very little time opportunity for any offset basically between the balance of items that were in the budget that actually were delivered in full or partially or not. So, but as the course of the year goes through, you tend to get some corrections in that. So just within that context. So we agreed, the Cabinet in 2024, that the performance indicators would be reported every 6 months. So these will come to this pack at its next meeting in November. Okay. The report in the pack, no pun, in the document today provides line-by-line details of financial performance for the services reporting into this pack, as well as the position for the council overall. So headlines, detail of which is on page 17. The outturn for the financial year for 24-25 is currently projected, as at the end of the first quarter, to be an overspend of 354,000 for the council overall. For this pack, the current projection, as at the end of the first quarter, is an underspend of 792,000. The council overall overspend arises from a combination of items, and these, or the most significant of those, are summarised on page 18 of the report. As I mentioned, it's still early in the current financial year, and the mitigating actions to be taken to address the overspend. So there is an opportunity for those mitigating actions to be taken. It's worth also saying that the budget included some fairly ambitious programme items, such as the completion timing for Maidstone East. Its delay has actually been a positive in that it's delivered unplanned income to the council through additional interest earned on the sums that are on deposit in relation to that project. Looking quickly at the causes of the variance, most of those fall into the planning and healthier, stronger communities pack, followed by housing and community cohesion. So just running through 4 of the major pieces that contribute to that number. The first one is Maidstone Property Holdings, particularly residential properties. So there's a shortfall of 437,000. Really emanating from rental income on Granada House, which has been treated as private rented sector and attributed to Maidstone Property Holdings. And also a new acquisition for PRS, which contrary to projections has not yet completed. It's believed it will complete, but it probably will fall into the next financial year, not this one. The second item is the Loch Meadow complex, where the shortfall of 400,000. This is mainly attributable to a shortfall in income from the vacant retail units within the complex, although it's now expected that they will be occupied with effect from Q3 this year. So that's a phasing point. Third is development management, 546,000. So this is the number of planning applications received is much less than forecast. And the majority of that shortfall focuses on major applications, so units where they're between 50 and 100 in total, and which the head of development management attributes to the fact that there are not enough potential large site developments in the current local plan to generate the sums needed to meet the budget. So in other words, most of that development is focused on the garden city type developments rather than more individual developments within the borough. And the fourth area to call out is temporary accommodation, so similar to last year. It's currently projected to overspend, and members will recall that last year's overspend was nearly 1 million. The budget for this year was increased by 450,000 in anticipation of those costs reducing, but with the council making more use of its own housing. In the event, costs are still expected to reduce, but unfortunately not yet to the extent anticipated, with an overspend of 200,000 at the end of the year currently projected. So, as an aside, the council is making acquisitions of properties around about 2 or 3 a month, as and when the supply comes forward, and that will help. And then over the course of the year, we may see those numbers converge. Mitigations to those risks. So they're really mitigated by reduced minimum revenue provision for the repayment of capital borrowing and higher interest income, both arising from the slippage in the capital programme. So more money in the bank, basically earning more interest, is offsetting those costs to an extent. At this relatively early stage in the financial year, there's still scope for reducing and ideally eliminating the overspend just through natural business as usual levers that we can pull to recover some of those costs and recoup and get back on track. The process for that will be within the natural sort of like budget process, which we're just about to enter into for the next financial year. Capital expenditure is expected to fall well behind projections. Details on pages 33 to 36 of the report. And the biggest element in that will be the council's housing programme. And finally, the report also deals with reserves and council tax and business rates collection on page 19 and treasury management page 20 and part C of appendix 1. From a risk perspective, you're happy if we cover risk now. From a risk management and risk reporting perspective, you have a separate report at the end of the pack. Appendix 2 gives an update on corporate risks, and a summary of the corporate risk register is on page 4 of the appendix, sorry. The main changes to the corporate risk register are, number 1, a new corporate risk to cover the uncertainty and potential implications of Kent County Council's current financial instability. So obviously that's a negative risk. And then the second one is a downgrading of the risk of election failure or challenge following the successful delivery of borough and national elections earlier this year. So that risk has been reduced, which is a positive. In terms of the risk register, we have Uchi Olufemi here. And if there are any questions on the risk report, Uchi's very happy, I believe, to come up and discuss those with us. So finally, in terms of recommendation, you're just recommended to note the contents of the report, if possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cox. Are there any questions from the committee? No, then, sorry, Councillor Gooch.
Sorry, I didn't just want to barge in. I spent ages going through this lot. And I have to say, I do think that we do this right, you know, because here we are at the beginning of the financial year. Well, no, it's the first quarter, but we're not even halfway through the year yet, not really. But already we've got all the appropriate lights buzzing. Watch out for this, watch out for that. Might be able to adjust this, that and the other. And even looking at the treasury management, which I do struggle with, I admit I do struggle with treasury management. But even so, I think in terms of transparency, I think this report really deserves acceptance, and I would just thank officers for all the work that's gone into it and all the thought that's gone into it, because we need to know this, because if it wasn't there, we would catch a cold further down the line. But so thank you for having given me a headache today as I went through it. But it's all good stuff. The questions I have, some of them are to do with other packs, and some of them are of a relatively minor nature that might come to fruition or not later on in the year. So I would say crack on, and I recommend that we accept these reports and thank the officers and Cabinet Member.
Sorry,
I haven't
thank
looked
you.
at the recommendation yet. Sorry.
Sorry, thank you. Just before you get onto the recommendation, just want to clarify that I haven't been able to update the paper copies of the agenda. They've been updated online, but there should be an extra recommendation to note the updated appendix to the risk update. So that's the just
Yeah,
free
that's fine. Looked at that as
recommendations.
well.
That's
Yeah.
fine. Thank you.
Okay, so can I ask if the committee agrees to note the report, the officer report?
Agree.
Thank you. And can I ask if the committee agrees to note the appendix, which is the risk update? Thank you. So, moving on to item 11. So, this is going to be introduced by Councillor Jeffrey, Leader of the Council.
Hello, everyone. John's here, that's good. I'm Clive sends his apologies for tonight, so I've agreed to introduce this item. What you've got in front of you is our old enforcement policy and a proposed revised policy 5 years on. The key bits that have changed, I'll come to in a second, but just to set out, I know enforcement is important to all of us, so it is a really important policy that we have to get right. All of us put this stuff into place, agree planning applications, report fly tipping. We all want to make sure that the right decisions, the right enforcement follow on where those breaches happen. So the policy is pretty much similar, except for a few key areas. One of those is around the partners that we include, community protection on the internal side and externally RSPCA. And it is the animals bit that has changed quite dramatically within the policy. So you will see inclusion of animal penalty notices, animal welfare generally, and licensing. Some of us, I think, around the table may have been lobbied recently. I think it was from the RSPCA on goldfish.
Oh, yes.
It was good to see a specific point in here around the prize of animals, and I'm trying to make sure we've got that clarification very clearly in our policies. So it is an update. It's really focused about animals, and I'm hoping that you'll discuss and add to it as need be. John, is there anything I've missed?
Okay, are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Gooch.
I'm sorry I forgot to turn my microphone off, but it's already on. Thank you very much for this report, which I tell you what made me think, what are you talking about? Was in the executive summary, which was very good, you know, it is what it is, but it was the word heritage. Enforcement heritage. It's about transparency and proportionality across the services who share in enforcement. And I thought, hang on a minute, to me, heritage is buildings, castles, all that sort of thing. So I have got an issue with that word. Being Mrs. Picky of 1924, I would love to see that word changed to role or responsibility, something that we can identify with that doesn't stop me in my tracks to think, what on earth have they put that word there for? However, on to the actual document itself. I do hope you can close the gaps, because on page 61, and I'm checking through it, I thought, hang on, the final one, 5D, on page 61. I thought, oh yeah, statutory notices, blah, 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 public spaces protection. Oh, they've left off the word order, but it's on the next page. So could you just make sure you close the gaps, I think, because I think this is a really important document, and it really does need to reflect its professionalism. And I noted the changes. There was something else I spotted. Sorry, bear with me. On page 69, again, we're looking at the new version, which incidentally, you're still calling it version 1. I know you've dated it July 24, but I don't know if you're going to call it version 2. You're still going to stick to version 1. I won't argue, I'm just being picky. I need to straighten it out in my mind. Under item 5.3, near the top of page 69, the paragraph beginning, many of the civil sanctions available to the authority are already identified in sections 5.3. I think you need a full stop there and start a fresh sentence to say, other appropriate options may be considered. And similarly, on this same page, in the next paragraph, other enforcement actions, on page 69, that last sentence, authorised in writing to do so in accordance with, I don't think we say in accordance to, do we? I don't. You're looking at me really funny, Mr. Edwards.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I think it's important to state this is a document that gets refined I think it's every 3 to 4 years. It keeps very much the same, but you said there seems to be just a couple of inherent old phrases that needs to be refined a little bit. I have to say I'm not the author of this, but we can make those changes that you suggest, Councillor Goot, can absolutely, will make no change to the document's meanings and intentions.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Chairman, because it's very important and very helpful, actually, document. So I certainly support it. Haven't looked at the recommendation, but whatever it is, I so recommend as per the papers, whatever it says.
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. Councillor Jones.
I just want to say, for the benefit of the committee, what is the meaning of heritage? Something that is handed down from the past as a tradition. It's not a building. I mean, it could be a building, but it's the ethos of what you did in the past is bringing it. Yeah. Do you like ethos? Good. But I think it's a good report. Might be a couple of typos, but yeah, it's good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Councillor Sweetman.
Sorry, I think heritage should say. I'm sorry. I think it's a good word.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Councillor Cannon.
Just very briefly, tell me if this isn't an opportunity for this policy, but is there anything that you can do about like anti-social bonfires? Is that sort of in this document?
Yeah, it is in there. We are obviously, there's a few rules and regulations that's been recommended in there. They may have changed in the last couple of years, but we just make reference to them as whole pieces of rules and regs. So there is rules. Not my field, I'm afraid. That's come from more of a community protection background, but I'm sure I can ask the manager to pick that up and direct a reply to you. That's okay.
Page 64, fifth bullet point, I think. And yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Jones?
Just wanted to support Councillor Cannon's comment. Antisocial bonfires. I mean, bonfires. I mean, they're hugely detrimental to the atmosphere. And why do people choose to have them at 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon on the hottest day of the year? They've got no respect for their neighbours, no consideration for their neighbours, and if there is anything that we can do to curtail an antisocial activity, I'd support that.
Thank you very much. I think we've all had shirts that smell of bonfire. Councillor Couch?
Yeah, just a question on FPNs. In supportive of the reasons to be issuing FPNs, but just wondering if anything's being done on the way that this is communicated to residents at a time when councils I know are getting accused of kind of over issuing FPNs as a source of income. I just know that that's a kind of complaint that can come up.
Yeah, the message needs to be, will be updated by our community protection team and our waste crime team about FPNs. Hopefully this document represents a justified and reasonable way of enforcement. You know, we have never issued FPNs as a force of income when it's an in-house service. These are done in a very measured way to change behaviour ultimately, but we would only issue those when they are appropriate, and hopefully get that change of behaviour is what we ultimately want here.
Yeah, I think if you sort of look at page 51, you'll see a sort of escalation. So things start with informal actions, advice, guidance, that kind of thing, and work up from there. Obviously, depending on what happens, but yeah, fixed penalty notices aren't always the first thing to go for. But yes, we will probably always be accused of doing so.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? No. So the committee is asked to consider the following recommendation to Cabinet: to approve the adoption of the Environmental Health, Waste, Crime and Community Protection Enforcement Policy 2024 to replace the 2019 policy. Is that agreed? Thank you. So on to item 13. So this is the property acquisition. It's going to be introduced by Councillor Cox.
Thank you, everyone. So I will only give a very short introduction. I wanted to introduce both Mark Green, who I'm sure you all know, and also Victoria Kellett, who I'm sure you've also both all know. This primarily is an officer's report, and I think it. That's okay, better to be safe than sorry. So this is primarily an officer's report. I think it's appropriate that Victoria and Mark present it in the first instance, and then I can give a statement at the end of the either part 1 or part 2 as appropriate.
Chair, can I ask whether members would like to go into part 2 at this stage? Because in order to describe the investment opportunity in detail, it's probably easier if I can talk about everything that is in front of you.
So can I ask the committee if you would like to go into part 2 at this stage? Okay, thank you.
So can you just specify for how long do you reckon, roughly, just for members of the public? I know many are listening right now.
How long do you reckon?
Well, how long do you feel like you want as a committee? Or you can just go indefinite for now.
Should we say 30 minutes?
If
We'll say 30 minutes. Thank you. And we're back in the room. Okay, so following the discussion, is the committee happy to recommend to Cabinet that they adopt this proposal? Thank you very much. Yeah, okay. So I now declare this meeting closed.